Shut up, Dad. The words sliced through the comfortable quiet of the dining room, sharper than the steak knife in my hand. They didn't come from a place of momentary teenage angst or a childish outburst. They came from my son, Mark, a 34-year-old man, and they were coated in a thick layer of contempt. His eyes, which once looked at me with adoration, were now cold, mirroring the glacial expression of his wife, Amelia, who sat opposite me. A tiny, triumphant smirk played on her lips. She had won. She had finally severed the last thread of respect that tethered my son to me. I just made a mild comment about the steak being a bit tough for my old teeth, a gentle jest, nothing more. But in the twisted dynamic of our new family unit, it was seen as a complaint, an act of defiance against the queen of the castle. My son, her loyal knight, had put the old king in his place. The clatter of my fork hitting the plate seemed to echo in the sudden, vast silence. I looked at Mark, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager I had helped with his homework, the young man I had guided into adulthood. He was gone. In his place was this hollowed-out man, a puppet whose strings were held firmly in the manicured hands of his wife. My heart, which had felt a dull ache of sorrow for the past 2 years, suddenly felt nothing at all. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The grief for my late wife, Martha, the loneliness, the desperate hope that my son would one day see the truth, it all vanished, replaced by an unnerving, icy calm. They thought I was a weak, doddering old fool, a convenient wallet, a live-in babysitter for their future children, and a placeholder in the grand house that my money, and my money alone, had bought. They mistook my patience for senility. They mistook my kindness for weakness. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake was telling me to shut up. I placed my napkin neatly on the table beside my plate of overcooked steak. I pushed my chair back, the sound of its legs scraping against the hardwood floor a deliberate, grating noise in the tense air. Amelia's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Mark's expression shifted to one of confusion. I stood up, my joints protesting slightly, a fact they often mocked. "Where are you going?" Amelia demanded, her voice dripping with the condescending tone she reserved exclusively for me. "It's dinner time." I didn't look at her. My gaze was fixed on the small key bowl by the front door. In it were the keys to my car, the keys to this house, and, metaphorically, the keys to their gilded cage. I walked toward the door, my steps measured and steady. "Dad!" Mark's voice was uncertain now, the bravado gone. He was a child again, unsure if he had broken a rule. I reached the bowl, and my fingers closed around the cool metal of the keys. I turned to face them one last time. They were both standing now, their faces a canvas of disbelief and dawning apprehension. "You wanted me to shut up, Mark," I said, my voice even and devoid of the emotion they expected. "So I will. Permanently." I turned my back on them, on the house Martha and I had filled with love, on the son I no longer recognized. I opened the door, stepped out into the cool evening air, and pulled it shut behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I walked to my modest sedan, the car they called my old man mobile, and got in. I did not speed away. I did not peel out. I simply put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb at a respectable, legal speed. As I drove, I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me to see. They thought I was running away to a lonely motel room to lick my wounds. They thought I'd come crawling back in a day or two, full of apologies, begging to be let back into their lives. They had no idea that I wasn't running away from something. I was driving toward everything. I was driving toward my revenge. My mind drifted back, as it often did, to Martha. We had been a team in every sense of the word. We started with nothing but a shared dream and a relentless work ethic. Our first business was a small logistics company, run out of our 2-bedroom apartment. I drove the one truck we owned, and Martha handled the books, the clients, the everything else. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and the belief that we were building something that would last, something for our future, for our son. Mark was born in the thick of it. He grew up with the smell of diesel and cardboard boxes. We weren't rich then, but we were wealthy in love and purpose. By the time Mark was in high school, the business had grown into a regional powerhouse. We weren't just a logistics company anymore. We were a major commercial landlord, having had the foresight to buy the warehouses and office parks our company and others operated from. That was Martha's genius. Never rent when you can own the dirt it stands on, Arthur, she'd say. The dirt is forever. When Martha got sick, our world tilted on its axis. The doctors gave her 2 years. We decided to sell the logistics side of the business to a national conglomerate. It was a massive deal, netting us a fortune that could have let us live in absurd luxury for 100 lifetimes. The papers were full of it. Our friends were astounded. Mark, who was in college at the time, was ecstatic. He saw the number, the headline figure, and his eyes lit up with possibilities. But he, like everyone else, missed the fine print. We sold the company, the trucks, the client lists, the goodwill. We did not sell the dirt. We retained ownership of every single commercial property, leasing them back to the new parent company in an ironclad 50-year agreement. It was a river of gold, a passive income stream so vast it dwarfed the profits from the initial sale. It was our real wealth, our forever money. Martha made me promise something during those last precious months. "Protect it, Arthur," she'd whispered, her hand frail in mine. "Protect it from everyone, even from Mark. Not because he's a bad person, but because he's a soft person. He has our heart, but not our spine. Someone will take advantage of him one day." She made me set up a complex web of trusts and holding companies, managed by our bulldog of a lawyer, Jonathan Pierce. She made me open accounts in Switzerland. For a rainy day, she'd winked. After she was gone, the silence in our big house was deafening. Mark had just met Amelia. She was beautiful, ambitious, and sharp. At first, I was happy for him, but I soon saw the way she looked at our home and my things. It wasn't with appreciation, it was with appraisal. She was calculating its worth, mentally redecorating, claiming it as her own before there was even a ring on her finger. They married in a ceremony that cost more than my first house. I paid for it all, of course. "We have to make a good impression, Dad," Mark had said, parroting a line I was sure Amelia had fed him. "It's important for my career." His career was a series of ill-conceived startups, each one funded by me. A boutique Cofiap, a subscription box for artisanal dog toys, an influencer marketing agency. Each one failed, more spectacularly than the last, burning through hundreds of thousands of dollars of my money. I never said no. I thought I was helping him find his footing. I see now I was just fattening the calf for the slaughter. When I wanted to buy a house, I didn't just give them a down payment. I bought the house for them outright, the very house I had just walked out of. It was my name on the deed, a detail they conveniently ignored. I moved in with them a year later, at their suggestion. "You shouldn't be all alone in that big, empty house, Dad," Mark had said, his voice full of what I then believed was genuine concern. "And besides, we could use the help. It makes financial sense." It was Amelia's idea, of course. They sold the house Martha and I built, the repository of all our memories, and pocketed the considerable profit. I let them. I moved into the guest room of the house I owned, becoming a tenant in my own home. My allowance, as Amelia jokingly called it, was a few $1,000s a month deposited into a joint account with Mark, just enough for my personal expenses. They believed my entire fortune consisted of the proceeds from the sale of our old house and a modest pension. They thought the river of gold had dried up into a small pond, and they were determined to drain it. The disrespect started subtly. My opinions were ignored. My friends were no longer welcome. I was asked to eat in the kitchen when they had important guests. It escalated to open mockery of my clothes, my habits, my grief. And tonight, it had culminated in those 3 words. "Shut up, Dad," Martha's warning echoed in my ears. "He has our heart, but not our spine." She was right. He didn't have the spine to stand up for his father, and now he would find out that I had a spine of pure, forged steel. Instead of a motel, I drove to a sleek, modern apartment building in the city's most exclusive district. The doorman, a pleasant man named George, greeted me warmly. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes. We weren't expecting you. Decided I needed a change of scenery, George," I said with a small smile. I took the private elevator to the penthouse. This was my secret, my bolt hole, a place I had maintained for 2 years, fully furnished, fully staffed, and completely off the books as far as my family was concerned. It was my Martha Protocol headquarters. The apartment was minimalist and modern, the polar opposite of the warm, cluttered home I'd shared with my wife. It was a place for business, not for living. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, a glittering tapestry of lives I was no longer a part of. I poured myself a glass of expensive scotch, not the cheap brand Amelia bought for me, insisting it was all the same, and sat down in a leather armchair. The first call was to my lawyer, Jonathan Pierce. He was in his late 70s, but his mind was as sharp as a box of razor blades. He picked up on the second ring. "Arthur," he said, his voice raspy. "It's late. Activate the Martha Protocol." "Jonathan," I said, no preamble. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a low chuckle. "So the boy finally did it, eh?" "Push you too far. He told me to shut up." "That'll do it," Jonathan said. Martha always said it would be something small and stupid that broke the camel's back. "All right, Arthur. The protocol is live. Step 1, the accounts. By the time the banks open tomorrow, their joint account with you will be frozen and all automatic transfers will cease. The funds are already being routed to your Geneva account as we speak. Step 2, I continued, taking a sip of scotch. The fiery liquid felt good, cleansing. "The house. It's an irrevocable trust, correct?" "The Hayes Family Heritage Trust," Jonathan confirmed, "of which you are the sole trustee with the absolute power to revoke residency of any and all beneficiaries. The eviction notices will be couriered to them by noon tomorrow. They'll have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days is generous," I mused. "It's the law, Arthur. Don't want to get bogged down in legal squabbles. We do this clean. We do this by the book. It's more painful that way," he was right. The cold, impersonal hand of the law was far crueler than any emotional outburst. Step 3. The vehicles: a black Mercedes for him, a white Range Rover for her, Jonathan recited from memory. "Both leased under your personal holding company. I'll make the call to the repossession agency first thing in the morning. They're very efficient. I expect the cars will be gone from the driveway before they finish their morning avocado toast." A cruel smile touched my lips. The image was deeply satisfying. "And the club membership?" "Cancelled as of this moment. Their key fobs will be deactivated. Imagine their surprise when they're turned away at the gate for their weekend golf game. The humiliation will be exquisite." "Good," I said, the word a stone in the quiet room. "That's everything for now, Arthur." Jonathan's voice softened slightly. "Are you all right?" "I've never been better, Jonathan," I replied, and I was surprised to find that it was the absolute truth. The sadness that had been my constant companion for 2 years was gone. In its place was a clarity I hadn't felt since Martha was alive. A sense of purpose. I wasn't just a grieving widower anymore. I was a force of nature. A reckoning. I hung up the phone and looked out at the city. Down there, in a beautiful house they thought was theirs, my son and his wife were probably feeling smug. They had finally put the old man in his place. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to crumble into dust. They had no idea that their comfortable, curated life was a house of cards, and I was about to blow it all down. For the first time in a long time, I slept soundly without dreams. The next morning, I didn't have to imagine their panic. It came to me, delivered directly via my phone, which I'd set to silent. The call started around 9:15 a.m. The first was from Mark. I let go to voicemail. I pictured him at the grocery store, his card declined, a look of confusion and embarrassment on his face. The voicemail, when I listened to it later, was laced with irritation. "Dad, where are you? The joint card isn't working. Call me back." An hour later, another call. This one from Amelia. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "Arthur, what did you do?" "Mark's card was declined." "This is ridiculous. Turn the account back on, right now. We have things to buy." I deleted the message without finishing it. The real fun, I knew, would begin around noon. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a frantic series of calls from both of them, back to back. They must have received the eviction notice. I let them all go to voicemail, a growing collection of their dissolving composure. Mark's messages were pleading. "Dad, please, what is this? A joke? Eviction? We have to talk." Amelia's were pure fury. "You old bastard. You can't kick us out of our own home. We'll sue you." We'll take you for everything you have. The irony of that threat was delicious. They were threatening to take what they mistakenly thought was a small pond, completely unaware of the ocean I commanded. Then came the call I was waiting for. Around 2 p.m., the repossession. Mark's voicemail was breathless, panicked. "Dad, they're taking the cars. They're taking my Mercedes. They have a tow truck in the driveway. Call them off. Please, Dad, whatever this is, it's gone too far." Amelia's was a screech of pure, unadulterated rage, so incoherent I could barely make out the words, just a stream of curses and threats. I sat in my penthouse, sipping a cup of freshly brewed coffee, and listened to the symphony of their destruction. Each voicemail was a musical note in the opus of their downfall. The arrogance, the entitlement, it was all melting away, replaced by the primal fear of people who have never had to stand on their own 2 feet. I spent the rest of the day in productive bliss. I had meetings with my financial advisors, restructuring my portfolio and moving significant assets into more liquid forms. I was planning a trip, a long one. I'd always wanted to see the fjords in Norway, to walk the ancient streets of Kyoto, to feel the sun on my face in the Greek Isles Martha, and I had planned to do it together. Now, I would do it for both of us. For a week, I maintained my silence. The calls and texts continued, shifting in tone from anger to desperation, and finally to a pathetic, whimpering plea. They had no money. Their friends, the ones they were so desperate to impress, had abandoned them the moment the club membership was revoked and the fancy cars disappeared. They were trapped in a beautiful house they were about to be thrown out of, with no resources and no allies. They had built their world on a foundation of my money, and I had simply pulled it out from under them. Finally, after 7 days of silence, I decided it was time. I sent a simple text message to Mark from a new, untraceable number. "Be at the offices of Pierce and Sterling at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Both of you. We will talk." I knew they would be there. They had no other choice. They were drowning, and they thought I was at last throwing them a lifeline. They couldn't have been more wrong. I was just there to make sure they sank all the way to the bottom. The conference room at Pierce and Sterling was designed to intimidate. It was all dark mahogany, black leather, and a single, massive table that felt like a slab of granite. The air was thick with the scent of old money and ruthless litigation. I was there first, sitting at the head of the table with Jonathan beside me. I wore a tailored suit I hadn't had occasion to wear in years. It felt like armor. When Mark and Amelia were shown in, I almost didn't recognize them. The week had not been kind. Mark looked gaunt, his face pale and unshaven. His expensive suit hung on him, wrinkled and defeated. Amelia, who always looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine, was a shadow of her former self. Her hair was unkempt, her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red-rimmed and full of a desperate, cornered animal fear. The designer clothes she wore now looked like a costume, a hollow reminder of a life that had evaporated. They hesitated at the door, clearly unnerved by the setting. Amelia recovered first, her fear quickly morphing back into its default state, anger. "There you are," she spat, marching toward the table. "Enough of these games, Arthur. You've had your little tantrum. You've made your point. Now, you're going to turn our money back on. You're going to call off this ridiculous eviction, and you're going to get our cars back." She slammed her hands on the table. It didn't make the resounding crash she was hoping for. The solid would simply absorb the impact with a dull thud. Mark shuffled in behind her, avoiding my gaze. He looked ashamed, broken. "Dad," he mumbled, "please, let's just talk about this." I remained silent. I let her tirade hang in the air, letting the sheer absurdity of her demands echo in the room. I looked from her furious face to my son's pathetic one. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just the cold, detached interest of a scientist observing a failed experiment. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly when she finally ran out of steam, her chest heaving. "Finished?" she shrieked. "I haven't even started. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've humiliated us. Our friends won't even talk to us. We're a laughingstock." "Your friends, Amelia," I said, my voice calm and measured, "were never your friends. They were admirers of your lifestyle. A lifestyle I funded. When the funding disappeared, so did they. It's a simple transaction, something you, of all people, should understand. Her face went crimson. How dare you? We built that life. No, I said, leaning forward slightly. I built it, and I paid for it. Every last brick of it. You just lived in it. I turned my attention to Mark, who flinched as if I'd struck him. It all started with 3 words, Mark. Shut up. Dad, do you remember saying that? He looked down at the table, his shoulders slumping. It was a stupid thing to say, he muttered. I was angry, no. I corrected him gently. It wasn't stupid. It was honest. For the first time in years, you were being completely honest. You were telling me what you and your wife truly believe my place in your life is. To be silent. To provide. To be an inconvenience you have to tolerate for the sake of my bank account. I gestured to Jonathan, who slid a thick binder across the table. You see, you both made a critical error in judgment. You assumed that the man you saw every day, the quiet, grieving old man in the guest room, was all there was. You saw my grief over losing Martha and mistook it for weakness. You saw my generosity and mistook it for foolishness, Amelia scoffed. Oh, please, don't act like you're some kind of secret genius. We know what you have. You sold the old house. You have a pension. It's a lot of money, but it's not endless, I smiled. A genuine, cold smile. This was the moment. The reveal. That, I said, is where you were profoundly mistaken. I tapped the binder. You thought I sold the business. And I did. The operational side of it. But you never bothered to ask about the assets, did you? The actual, physical properties. The warehouses, the office parks, the land. Martha, your mother, I said, looking directly at Mark, was a brilliant woman. She always said, never sell the dirt. We retained ownership of every single property. We leased them back to the new company. That lease generates an income, a passive income, that is more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. The color drained from Amelia's face. She stared at the binder as if it were a snake. Mark looked up at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. That can't be true, Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Oh, but it is, Jonathan chimed in, opening the binder to the first page, which showed a summary of assets. The number at the bottom was so large it seemed preposterous. The holding company that leases your cars? That's Arthur's. The trust that holds the deed to your house. Arthur is the sole trustee. The money you thought was a simple inheritance was merely the interest from a fraction of one of his accounts. You weren't living off his savings. You were living off the pocket change as real fortune generates. Amelia sank into a chair, her mouth opening and closing silently. She looked at the number, then at me, then back at the number. The arrogance, the anger, all of it was gone, replaced by the sheer, soul-crushing shock of realizing just how badly she had miscalculated. Mark just sat there, shaking his head slowly. Why, Dad, he finally choked out. Why would you let us believe you were? Struggling. Because I wanted to see who you were, Mark, I said, my voice hardening. When your mother was alive, we protected you from everything. We gave you everything. I see now that was a mistake. I made you soft. After she died, I decided to step back. I gave you a long rope. I wanted to see if you would build something with it, or if you would use it to hang yourself. You chose to let your wife fashion it into a leash, and you put it around your own neck. I stood up, the finality of the moment settling over me. The house is being sold. The contents will be liquidated. Your cars are gone. The club is a memory. The joint account is closed. All financial support of all kinds has ceased, effective 1 week ago. You can't do this. Amelia cried, finding her voice again, though it was thin and reedy. He's your son. You have a duty to him. I looked at Mark, my son, the boy I had loved more than life itself. I had a son, I said, the words tasting like ash. But he's gone. He was replaced by a man who would stand by and watch his wife disrespect his father. He was replaced by a man who, when asked to choose, chose a life of luxury over a lifetime of love and loyalty. The man sitting before me is a stranger. And you, I said, turning my gaze to Amelia for the last time, are nothing to me. This isn't revenge. Revenge is an emotional act. This is a business transaction. You failed to live up to your end of the bargain. The unspoken contract of basic human decency and respect. So, your privileges have been revoked. The bill for your choices has come due. I walked to the door without looking back. Jonathan would handle the rest. As I stepped out into the hallway, I heard a single, ragged sob from inside the room. I didn't know if it came from Mark or Amelia. And I realized, with a profound sense of peace, that I didn't care. In the year that followed, I did everything Martha and I had planned. I stood at the edge of the Geirangerfjord Fjord in Norway, the sheer scale of it making all my past troubles seem insignificant. I walked through the Arashima bamboo grove in Kyoto, the rustling leaves sounding like a gentle whisper from the past. I ate fresh fish in a tiny taverna on the island of Crete, the sun on my face and the brilliant blue of the Aegean Sea stretching out before me. I reconnected with old friends, people Mark and Amelia had pushed out of my life. We laughed, we told stories, we mourned the past, and celebrated the present. I was not lonely. I was free. I learned, through Jonathan, what became of them. As I predicted, their friends vanished overnight. The Fairweather Society they had cultivated had no time for the suddenly poor and disgraced couple. The humiliation was total. They were forced to move out of the house, taking only their personal belongings. Facing a mountain of debt they had accrued on their own, and with no income, the pressure became too much. Amelia, who had married for money and status, saw no reason to stay once both were gone. She left Mark within 3 months, filing for a messy divorce where she tried, and failed, to lay claim to a fortune that was never his. She disappeared after that, presumably to find another wealthy host to latch onto. Mark was left with nothing. The man who told his father to shut up now had to beg for a menial job in data entry. He lived in a small, run-down apartment on the other side of town, the kind of place he would have sneered at in his former life. He tried to contact me, of course. At first, the messages were full of blame and self-pity. Then, as the months wore on, they became more reflective, more apologetic. He started leaving voicemails on a special number Jonathan had set up for me, a number I never answered but had the messages transcribed and emailed to me. Dad, I know you won't hear this, but I get it now. I was weak. I let her poison everything. I miss you. I miss Mom. I wish I could go back. I am so sorry. I read the messages, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, not a desire to reconcile, but a distant, academic sadness for the boy he used to be. But that boy was gone, and the man he had become had to learn to stand on his own. My kindness had been a crutch for him his entire life, and by taking it away, I had performed one last, brutal act of fatherhood. I had forced him to grow a spine or break completely. Which path he would ultimately take was no longer my concern. My life was my own now, unburdened by undeserved obligations. I had honored my wife's memory, I had protected what we built, and I had taught a hard, necessary lesson. Some might call what I did cruel. They might say that family is unconditional, but I believe that respect is the currency of love. And when the account is overdrawn and the debtor refuses to pay, there is only one course of action. You close the account, you walk away, and you never, ever look back.